Okay, we continue our discussion on Lechem Mishne. And Lechem, you don't have one? Oh, there you go. Lechem Mishne, as we talked about the last few days, is the obligation we have. Then we have challah on Shabbos and Yom Tif. We have to have 2 loaves of bread. And we discussed at length where it comes from. Right, it comes from the man. That a Friday, the manna, no, we're here already. The manna fell double portion, and that's why we have 2 challahs. And we talked about the machloket, Rashi and Rashba, whether you have to actually cut both pieces of bread or just hold both pieces of bread when you make hamotzi. And we saw the halacha is that all you have to do is hold it during hamotzi, and all you have to do is really just cut only one of the 2. You don't have to cut both of them. But you should know that there's a discussion about whether or not the other one has to be edible, even if you're not actually going to eat it. For example, frozen challah. Can that be one of your 2 Lechem Mishne? No. So the discussion about it, and it seems that the halacha is you can, as long as it's going to defrost by the time the meal is over, even if you don't end up eating it, but it has to be available for you by the end of the meal. Even if you don't end up eating it, right? Because you learned from the Rashi says you have to cut both. Rashi says you only have to cut one, right? But even if you only cut one, the other one still has to be an edible challah for you at the end of the meal, right? So which means you have to be able to. So a similar question, for example, on Erev Pesach, when you can't have matzah, and after a certain point you can't have challah, right? If Erev Pesach is Shabbos, you have to have your meal early, otherwise you can't even hold your Lechem Mishne. Yeah. What? Sure, it happens. It happens, sure.
And could you have one pita and a challah, right?
Sorry?
A pita, let's say a pita and a challah, it's okay.
That's fine. Challah doesn't, the truth is we call it challah, but you're not obligated to have challah. You're just obligated to have a whole loaf of bread. We make challah, but challah is a tradition that came in Ashkenaz land to make these fancy looking breads. But it's not like a requirement by halacha to have a fancy looking bread. Sorry?
Maximum of thing you have to do the left hand. Like, is there a maximum?
Make as many breads as you want.
So, like, for example, if I take like small breads like this, you can still work for the.
Yeah, Lechem Mishne. You have 2 small, tiny little rolls. So that's why a lot of times at simchas they'll put small rolls in everybody's table, so everybody can make their own Lechem Mishne for that reason.
Or what if I take one and split it? Can that be 2?
No, because it has to be 2 whole challahs. It has to be 2 whole loaves, even if it's small ones.
So it has to be the full, nothing could be taken off from the bottom, right?
Yes, it should be a full loaf. Yeah, as best as possible, at least. If you don't have, then it's a different story. Okay, then we got into discussion yesterday. We can finish off with the discussion about whether or not it is biblical or not. Right? We saw the Taz, which said it is biblical. It's the Daraita. And because it's the Daraita to have Lechem Mishne, he said that having Lechem Mishne, if you only have money for Lechem Mishne or for anything else really, including for Chanukah menorah, then you buy Lechem Mishne because Lechem Mishne is the Daraita. Whereas we saw from the Alter Rebbe, who wrote that it's a smach. The verse is not, the pasuk which says Lechem Mishne, they collected 2 loaves of bread, is not a commandment that you have to have 2 breads. It's only a pasuk the Chachamim relied on to make their mitzvah, but not because it's actually Doraita. Right? Is that clear? Remember this? Okay. So now we're going to look at 2 more sources that talk about whether, what type of obligation it is and what the difference is. Like, what's the difference if it's a Doraita or not a Doraita? So one difference we saw is, does it take precedent over wine, or does it take precedent over Chanukah menorah? It depends. Is it Doraita or Rabbanan? According to the Taz, it's Doraita, and therefore it does take precedent over all these things. Here's another example of when it makes a difference, whether or not it's Doraita or not Doraita. Okay? Now this comes from the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch is talking about, remember when we learned the Gemara right at the beginning, we talked about this thing called Redias Hapas, lowering the bread. Right? We talked about how in old times they had a brick oven and the bread was stuck to the side of the walls of the oven, and it was a whole art to know how to get the bread to bake exactly right, and they had these special like spatulas or like shovel-looking things where they would slowly take the bread off the side of the brick without ruining the bread, without making it fall into the oven, into the fire, without peeling it, without breaking it. It was a whole art. And because it's a whole art, the Chacham said don't do it on Shabbat. Right? And we discussed this thing that if there's challah there, there's loaves of bread stuck there, and Shabbat starts, I can't take it down. The Gemara said you can take that enough for your meals, enough you need for your 3 meals, and you can tell other people to take it down because that's for a mitzvah. And for a mitzvah, you don't have, the Chachamim allowed you to do this thing because it's for a mitzvah. Remember this? Yes? Remember this? Yeah? Okay, what do you want to ask?
It's risky in the fire, no? Because you can cause the fire.
Yeah, so there's a whole art to knowing how to do it. But actually, the Gemara said you should do it in a way different than you would during the week. During the week, you use a fancy shovel, and during Shabbat, you should use a knife. So you're doing a shino. You're changing from the way you do it during the week.
But how much you're going to make a fire?
You have to be careful it doesn't fall in the fire. If the fire is still active. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch says that nowadays, that our ovens don't have this fancy thing. You know, there's no technique and no art to taking bread out of your oven. Right? So because there's no technique and no fancy art, says the Shulchan Aruch, you can take the bread out of the oven. Right? Because there's no problem. Right? Assuming that the oven is not electric and you don't have to open it and close it and make the electricity go back on. Talking about an olden day oven, times of the Shulchan Aruch, but not so olden day like the Gemara where they had this fancy technique of lowering the bread from the side of the wall. So it's a brick oven. Let's say it's like a modern pizza oven. It's open, you don't have to open and close it. It's a modern pizza oven, not sticking to the side of the wall, the bread's breaking on the floor of the oven, but it doesn't take any fancy technique to take it out. So it says Shulchan Aruch, you're allowed to take the bread out, but still you should use a knife better than using the fancy shovel to make a shinoi. Better than using the spatula. Clear? That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Okay? Okay. Now it says in the Lechem Avram. V'oid nearly on page 5. Dafka bepas hitiru mazon shalosh sudas. It's specifically for bread that the Shulchan Aruch is allowing us to take out bread enough for 3 meals. Why? T'chai b'Shabbos lechol pas. Because a person is obligated to have 3 meals, and he's obligated to have bread at each meal. Aval shar tavshilin, but to take other things out of the oven, meat, fish, whatever it is. Im nosen be'isser, if he put those pieces of food into the oven in a way that he wasn't supposed to, either he put it in on Shabbos, which is for sure forbidden, but even Erev Shabbat, there are only certain ways in which you're allowed to put foods into the oven. Right? Like making your cholent or your dafina on Erev Shabbat, there's certain rules about how you make it. You know what the rules are? The general principle is either the meat has to be completely raw when Shabbat starts, or completely cooked when Shabbat starts. If it's halfway, you can't cook that in Erev Shabbos. So when Shabbos starts, the meat in your crock pot either has to be completely raw or already cooked. That's the rule. At least according to the Alter Rebbe.
Nowadays also?
Yeah. This applies today as well. So now, if the food was put into the oven in a way you're not supposed to, afilu b'shoigig, even if you did it by mistake, aser ad motzei Shabbos, it's forbidden to eat those food until Shabbos is over. Right? The halacha is that if a person violated Shabbos, whether he knew or didn't know, and made food, so the halacha is you're not allowed to enjoy that food, because that food was made on Shabbos. It was made in a forbidden way. Different story. Even if the guy does it for you, that's generally speaking, that's the rule. If the guy, sorry? Not necessarily. It's a good question. But that's another set of halachas. Okay. Now, so therefore says the Lechem Mishne, only bread you're allowed to take out of the oven, which ordinarily you're not allowed to because it was put in Shabbos in the wrong way, or put in before Shabbos in the wrong way. Bread that Shulchan Aruch is saying allowed to take out because you need it for your 3 meals, which is a mitzvah. But other foods, which is not an obligation to have other food at your meal, it's a nice thing, not an obligation. And because this food was put into the oven in the way that was usher, even if it was only done by accident, you're not allowed to eat it until after Shabbos is over. Okay? Now it continues. Miu im ein lo kal ma yochel, if he has no other food available, doesn't have bread, doesn't have anything else, shardi, then he's allowed to take out the food from the oven. Why? Given the usher l'sanas Shabbos, because it's forbidden to fast on Shabbos. And if the only food I have is what's in the oven, take it out, even though ordinarily you wouldn't be able to. It says elsewhere. Now here's the interesting thing. What if a person only has exactly 3 loaves of bread? Now, if a person only has exactly 3 loaves of bread.
For 2 days?
For one day of Shabbos. There's 3 loaves of bread, 3 loaves of challah. The 4th one is in the oven. He's allowed to take it out.
Yes, because it's
No, it says you only need it like the next day.
1 second. What? But so what? I need it the next day for Lechem Mishne. Because Friday night I'm going to eat one. Okay, so Friday night I don't need the challah that's in the oven because I have.
Oh no, you don't have to eat both. You only eat one. So if you think about it.
1 second, but I have to be holding 2, right? So Friday night I have 3 loaves of bread. So Friday night I can take 2, eat 1, save the next one for Shabbos day. Shabbos day I pick up 2, eat 1, and I have 1 left. Now I need it for Shalosh Shudas. I need it for the 3rd one, and the 4th one. I need that 1 last challah. It's in the oven.
For what?
For Lechem Mishne, for Shalosh Sudot. So I have 1 last challah. It's in the oven. Am I allowed to take it out or not?
Are you allowed to prepare for later? No.
Let's say right now it's what's the difference? Let's just say he's allowed to take it out.
Yeah, of course.
Why?
Because you need it.
Because you need it for Lechem Mishne. According to the Taz, which said that it's Doraita, do you think you're allowed to take that out? Of course, it's a Doraita. Says the Magen Avram like this: V'im yesh lo pas echad mazin shalosh shudas. If he has 1 loaf of bread for each of his 3 meals, and he needs the 4th one for Lechem Mishne, asur lahatzal. He cannot take it out of the oven. Even though he needs 2 whole loaves of bread for each meal, it's not such a strong obligation. And therefore he says, don't take it out. But the Taz agrees with this? No. The Taz would say it's Doraita, you got to take that challah out so you can have it so you can have Lechem Mishne. The Alter Rebbe, I don't know. Because Alter Rebbe said it's a smach. But here he's saying it's even less. It's not such a big obligation. Smach, the Alter Rebbe wrote that it's not a biblical commandment, but they use the pasuk as a support for their mitzvah. And here he's saying it's even less. It's not such a big obligation. And therefore don't take out that challah. I don't remember what the Alter Rebbe says, I don't know. But here it's another view. We go from one level where it's biblical, Daraita like the Taz, to the other extreme like the Magen Avram, which says it's not such a chayv, not such a big obligation. Okay, one more text, and this is interesting. A person who breaks his fast in Yom Kippur, right? Because he has to. Because he's not feeling well, and for whatever the reason is, the Shulchan Aruch says he has to break his fast. And he ends up eating bread, and he ate enough bread that he's now chayiv in Birchat HaMazon. So what does he have to do in his Birchat HaMazon? He has to say Yal V'yavai. Because it's Yom Kippur, it's a Yom Tif, it's a holiday. Even though he's not supposed to be eating, but because the Shulchan Aruch allows him to eat now, because a child or someone a child that doesn't have obligations, but he's an adult, he's washing, he's eating bread because he has to eat because he's sick or whatever the reason is. Whatever the reason is, right? So it says the Shulchan Aruch that he has to say Yalav Yavai in his Birchat HaMazon. But said the Taz, you don't have to have Lechem Mishne at your Yom Kippur meal.
You don't have that.
Well, if you have to have Yalav Yavai because it's Yom Tiv, how come I don't have to have Lechem Mishne? Interesting question. There's even a big question if you have to make Kiddush. We're not going to discuss that now, but I'm just telling you that there is such a discussion. If a person is required by halacha to break his fast in Yom Kippur because he's sick or whatever the reason is, does he have to make Kiddush or not? Separate question. But certainly he has to say Yalav Yavai in his Birchat HaMazon. Right? And now says the Taz, even though you have to make Birchat HaMazon, so which means it's a holiday meal, even though it's Yom Kippur, but the Shulchan Aruch allows you, so you have to.
You guys are on this page still?
Last page 6. Nonetheless, no Lechem Mishne. Now says the Gemara, says the Machzas the Shekel, which is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, why? So look at the second to last line on the right side. The Loi Tiknu came by Yom Kippurim. They did not make the obligation. The Chachamim who said to have Lechem Mishne did not make the obligation for Yom Kippur. Why? Because it's only from the Chachamim to have Lechem Mishne. It's not Daraita. So who's he following? The Taz or the Magen Avram?
Okay.
Magen Avram. The Ein Chayv Kol Kach, and it's not such a big obligation. Ukmay Shekasav Magen Avram, which we just read. And he puts in parentheses, the loy ketaz, not like a taz. Taz says deraita. The mashma that's really medina Torah, that it seems from the taz that he says it's deraita, it's biblical. But according to the way the Machtash Shekel is learning, and the way the Magen Avram is learning, the Ein Chayv Kol Kach, it's not such a strong obligation. And because it's not such a strong obligation, V'im came Yom Kippurim, and if when it comes to Yom Kippur, if the halacha is that he has to break his fast, no Lechem Mishne, because Yesh Lamed Lo Tiknu, we might say that the Chachamim didn't say you have to do it in Yom Kippur also. Now it says the Machtash Shekel something interesting. The Yesh Talmud Davar, and it makes sense. There's logic. There's logic to why on Yom Kippur there's no Lechem Mishne. If it so happens to be that he has to break his fast. Why? Taltam Lechem Mishne Zeichel Aman. Where did the whole Lechem Mishne come from? To remember what happened when? By the manna, when they had double portion on Friday. Like the Gemara said in Shabbos, which we learned a few days ago. Because the Pasuk says they collected a double portion on Friday. Right. Over Yom Kippurim, and on Yom Kippur, certainly no man fell on Yom Kippur, just like no man fell on Shabbos. But nonetheless, misvara would make sense. It would make sense that in the Erev Yom Kippur, Hashem did not make a double portion fall down. Erev Yom Kippur in the desert. Do you think Hashem made two portions fall down? Why? Because the whole reason why Hashem made double portion fall down on Fridays, so that they can eat the second one on Shabbos. But if Yom Kippur in the desert you have to fast, why would Hashem make it fall down twice, double? Wouldn't. If that's the case, then if the whole reason why Lechem Mishne is to remember the man that fell down double on Friday, and that's why I'm having 2 loaves of bread on Shabbos, and the same thing on Yom Tov, before Yom Tov arrived, Hashem made two portions fall down, eat the second one on Yom Tov, and that's why I have to have Lechem Mishne on Yom Tov. But on Erev Yom Kippur, Hashem probably did not make 2 loaves of bread fall down. If that's the case, even if I happen to be eating on Yom Kippur, doesn't apply.
So when you make a soda,
Interesting little halacha.
you never have to do,
Sorry?
when you make a soda, you never have to do Lechem Mishne.
Only on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Not during the week, no. Okay, so this ends our discussion on Lechem Mishne. It gives you kind of an overview what it's all about. Hope you appreciate it a little bit more. And hopefully when you do the mitzvah on Shabbos, you know a little bit more. And tomorrow, 2 choices. Tell me what you'd like to do. 1, Tzar Balachayim. Understanding what Tzar Balachayim is. There's a prohibition, there's an avera from making animals suffer. You can understand that. That's 1, understanding where that mitzvah comes from, what it's all about. Or another option is to learn about who has to build a Beit HaMikdash.
The first one, please.
Yes, maybe we'll do the Tzar Balachayim, and then afterwards we'll do the Beit HaMikdash another time.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, have a wonderful day.